Hey, boys and girls, today we're going to read Steve Jenkins' book, The Top of the World, Climbing Mount Everest. And we're going to read this book today for generating ideas. So this is our first lesson where you are going to start working in a writer's notebook and kind of think about your brainstorm some ideas so that by the end of next week we have a topic selected for our nonfiction pieces. All right, let's get started. Writers of nonfiction often write about topics that they are fascinated by or passionate about. Today, we're going to explore our own passions and consider potential nonfiction topics. So Steve Jenkins, the author of Top of the World, is a writer and a scientist who's always been fascinated by mountain climbing. Readers can get a sense from reading his book that not only has he climbed Mount Everest, but he spends a lot of time reading and thinking about it. Let me show you what I mean. This section of the book is entitled Kathmandu. Try to get it up there. All right. When you arrive in the bustling capital city of Nepal, you'll collect your gear, meet your guides, and pay for your climbing permit. If you're lucky, you'll have time to pay a visit to the Monkey Temple, one of the many Buddhist religious sites in the city. Sherpas and other climbers often make offerings here before beginning an expedition. Kathmandu is also where you'll begin the long trek to Everest. So I get the feeling that he was there, don't you? When you're passionate about something, you actually spend time doing it. This page is called First to the Top. So hard to get it lined up. The British expedition of 1921 was the first organized attempt to climb Mount Everest. Sickness and exhaustion kept the climbers from reaching the top, but they did discover a route to the summit. Many attempts by climbers of different nationalities followed, but no one succeeded until May 29th, 1953. Wow, that's a big time difference. When Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay reached the summit. Hillary was from New Zealand and Tenzing Norgay was a Sherpa from Nepal. Both men became international heroes. So that information seems to have come from reading about Mount Everest. So when you're passionate about something, you're often going to read everything about it that you can get your hands on. I think I skipped a page. Yes, I did. This page is called The Greatest Climber. Let's see if I can get that in there. I'm not going to be able to read that one. I'll have to read it though. All right. In 1980, the Australian climber Reinhold Messner accomplished what was considered an impossible feat. He climbed Mount Everest alone, without bottled oxygen. Messner was also the first to climb all of the 14 peaks in the world that are higher than 8,000 meters, or 26,247 feet. He is considered by many to be the greatest mountaineer of all time. So a mentor is someone you look up to for guidance and inspiration. I bet Reinhold Messner is somewhat of a mentor to Steve Jenkins. that makes me wonder, who are some of my mentors? What are some things that I've read about often? And what are some things that I've spent some time doing? Let's see. What else? I'm looking for up and down. Oh, here we go. I'll kind of zoom in on the page. I think I can get this one in focus. At 29,000 feet, there is only 1/3 as much oxygen as at sea level. In fact, if someone at sea level were suddenly transported to the top of Everest, he or she would die within a few minutes from lack of oxygen. To prepare for the extremely thin air, you must make several round trips from base camp to higher and higher points on the mountain, sometimes spending the night before starting back down. Staying for increasing periods of time high on the mountain keeps you from getting altitude sickness on summit day. And so you can see in the picture, Kathmandu is at the bottom, and then he marks like each base camp. And he marks the altitude in feet. And so you'd go from Kathmandu to base camp 1. Then you'd go from you'd go from base camp to camp 1 and come back down. Then you'd go from base camp to camp 1, probably spend the night. I see a little tent. Then you'd go from 1 to 2 and back down. Then you'd go back to 2. Then you'd go to 3. And then after 4, when you get to camp 4, then you've got to make it all the way to the top. And back down. On this page, Steve imagines an impossible scenario. It would be horrible if that happened, but it never would, because it's impossible to suddenly just transport someone to the top of Everest. So when you're really passionate about something, you spend time thinking about it and imagining some of the possibilities. All right, so Steve is like a lot of nonfiction writers. He writes about topics that he's passionate about and that he's fascinated by. Do you have things that you're passionate about in the way that Steve is passionate about Mount Everest? What are you so fascinated by that you read and ask a lot of questions about it? What topics do you spend a lot of time thinking about? And what activities do you do often? So our fundamentals kit gave us some questions. So I'm going to do this just out loud with my passions. And then maybe in your writer's notebook, you're going to spend some time kind of answering some of these similar questions. All right, so do you have things you're passionate about the way Steve is passionate about Mount Everest? Well, I'd have to definitely say teaching. I spend a lot of time thinking about teaching and looking at things related to teaching. I spend a lot of time just teaching in general. And so what am I so fascinated by that I would learn about it by reading or asking a lot of questions? Well, so I'd say teaching again, but I also got this new digital like paper cutter and vinyl cutter. So I've been reading a lot about that and watching videos to learn how to use it and looking at people who are crafting and what kinds of crafts other people are making with their letter cutter, with their vinyl cutter. And so that would be another one that's not teaching related. And let's see, something else I read a lot about. So people, like I went to see the play Hamilton last year at Christmas. And so after I saw the play, I really wanted to know more about Alexander Hamilton and what was fictional and what was not fictional about him. What was kind of historically accurate about the play, what other kinds of information I could find out. So after I saw that play, I was really asking and reading a lot of things about Alexander Hamilton. Let's see, what topics do you spend a lot of time thinking about? I don't know. Food comes to mind. I do a lot of reading and research of recipe books and doing a lot of cooking. We're also going on our first family Disney trip. So we've been spending a lot of time thinking about what we're going to do at Disney and trying to plan and organize our trip so that we are ready and organized for that. And then last it says, what activities do you engage in often? For that one, I'm going to say probably cooking, definitely teaching stuff. You know, I know that's my job, but sometimes I just do teaching stuff just for fun, just to see what new kinds of things are out there. So those are some of my passions. You're going to have a Google slide that helps you explore some of your passions. Okay, so during your writing time today, I want you to fill up the page with ideas. Don't just pick one topic. Go ahead and think about many topics that you're fascinated about, that you spend time reading about or thinking about or asking questions about or watching videos about. And I'm excited to see what you guys come up with in your notebooks. Happy writing!